Good evening, beloved. I hope you're doing well this evening. My name is Bukwasi. I take this opportunity to welcome you all to Late Impact, a platform dedicated for education. We speak of anything and everything that affects our lives and try to find the solutions from the Word of God. May I check, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have a special discussion today with our lovely sisters that most of you may be familiar with them, Sister Hudatso as well as Dr. Khomutso. They'll be sharing with us tonight. There is much to cover, interesting subjects. And one of the things that I would say is that one time when I was at the mall, I met a lady that was having difficulties with his son. The son had this disorder, which I did not know what it was, but you could see that he speaks anyhow, anytime, and he was unable to focus on certain things. But you could see that the mother was so irritated and she felt like she was being embarrassed. And I think these are the things that we're going to be discussing tonight as we are going to be looking at raising neuro yeah, there are the terms. Neurodivergent children. I think that's the subject that we're going to be looking at. Dr. Khomutso will actually give us all the definitions that are necessary for us to understand this condition. And I know that most of us, even though we may have not have such people in our families, but we may be aware and have met with some people with those conditions. Some of us may be having them in our families, and sometimes it becomes very difficult to deal with such individuals and how to care for them because they are different from many of us. So it's difficult to understand them and to care for them the way they need to, and also to position them to strive in the world for those that are able to be helped to strive. And also to look at how do parents deal with such conditions. I think Sister Khomutso, Futas will be dealing mainly with those psychological aspects, how to prepare your mind to deal with such a child. Obviously, no one wants to find himself in that situation, but things do happen, and you find yourself having such a child, and you will need to make a way and prepare space in which the child can grow and thrive and be a human like any other person. We'll be discussing tonight. Having said that, I would ask us to have a word of prayer as we start, acknowledging that we do not have knowledge of our own. We depend entirely upon God's blessing and God's wisdom to actually know what to say, how to say it, and also the implementation of it. Because when we read the Bible, we are told that God is a wonderful counselor, but he's not only satisfied by counseling us, but he's also one is excellent in working. That's what Isaiah says. So as we are going to start this discussion, I would ask us to close our eyes as we pray. Our kind and loving Father, once again, we want to thank you for this opportunity that you're giving us to have these discussions, which are meant to ease the difficulties that some may be going through, prepare others to be able to strive in the life which you have granted them. And also, Father, we want to ask for wisdom and guidance in all that we say or do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you very much. I will ask my guest speakers to just unmute themselves and welcome our speakers. I will ask them to just unmute themselves and greet the panel, or rather the, the audience.
Oh, I was struggling to do that. Well, I guess a blessed greetings to everyone. and welcome to tonight's session. I, for one, it's not really an exciting subject to talk about, but I must be honest, I am quite keen and always am excited to share information that I know will, enhance someone else's quality of life and bring them closer to God's will for their life, regardless of the challenges that they may be going through. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to what tonight may potentially bear for many parents that will be joining in.
Thank you very much, sister. It's good to see you once again. It's been a while having you
It
in this
always is
platform.
good to see you. Yeah, work has been very busy, but we are alive. We are alive and well and are thankful to be here. I also miss it. But yeah, I'm happy to be here tonight.
Thank you, ma'am. We really appreciate your time. We know that you're going to gain much as the Lord will be leading you. Dr. Promoto, are you there with us?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm here. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, you look new. What happened?
I always look new. It's a woman's secret. um, a
Good
change
to
in
see you, my
hairstyle
friend.
is always good. Yes, it's good to be here. Good evening, everyone. I'm just saying hi to my friend here that I haven't seen in a while. As Sister Naraya was saying, life gets busy, so busy that we don't see each other. So it's good to be able to come together.
Man, we thank this platform. At least you managed to have time for this one. We appreciate. Um, and I can tell you guys, it's very difficult to get this sister, and I'm glad that we have finally met in this platform. Probably we'll meet here, and it will end right here. I've been trying to get her to Cape Town. She doesn't want to come this side. It's okay. Maybe at some
By God's
point.
grace, we'll be able to do all of these things. Yeah, by God's grace.
Amen. Amen. I think you guys are more loved than many of us, and yeah, that is why when the appointment is called on your behalf, she always avail herself. So we thank the Lord for that.
Amen.
Doc, without wasting much of our time, um, maybe we can just go straight to the subject matter. And I've been struggling to pronounce these words, but as the subject was being discussed in preparation, I actually understood what it meant, and I have seen such conditions around me. Some are very close to me, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to have this thing discussed and position ourselves as to how to deal with such conditions, what we ought to know, and how to respond to such conditions that we may find ourselves in or our children in. So, having said that, I'll give you a platform to just give us the definitions and probably the conditions, and then we can take it from there.
All right. Once again, good evening to everyone who's come in. And allow me. Normally, when I come on lit, I don't do PowerPoint presentation. But as Brother Kosi was saying, we're talking about neuro, the brain, and a lot of us can't imagine what that is like. So I've just put together a short presentation just to help us visualize what it is we're talking about. Um, and if you've been to other presentations, you will know that I try to find a simpler way to formulate things. So if it's quite different from what you know, it is all okay. Let me just see if I can find my presentation in a proper way. Um, I hope it will work.
Yeah.
You can see my slides.
Yes.
Is it all big?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can enlarge it, but we can see it.
All right. So on my side, it's enlarged. I got concerned when I saw what I saw. Um. So okay, let me try something else. If not, I'm just gonna present it with it being like this,
Brother
so
Mpo
that you
can
don't.
just assist on that. Brother Mpo?
Because when I go to share, it asks me to share Chrome tab or window or entire screen. And I don't want to share the entire screen. I think it's window. All right. Um, all right. But it will be better if you can see what I see. So let me try.
You can still share the full screen. We'll still see you.
No, you don't need to see me. You just need to see the slide. But you see, on my side, I have made the slide full, but then you're not, that's not what you're seeing on your side, isn't it? Mm. All right, it's
No,
fine. The little
it's
that you
fine.
can see
Yeah.
may be fine. So that in the interest of time, because there is a lot to, sorry. Yeah, I see what you're seeing. I don't know how to make it any bigger, but I'm hoping that will be enough. All right. So we're talking about neurodivergence. It's actually one word. I've just broken it up here just so that we can simplify it. Neuro relates to anything that's neurological, that's brain and spinal cord related, right? And divergence, we understand that when things don't converge, they diverge, they go in different directions, right? Um, so that's what we mean by neurodivergence. And I said it's compiled because I literally just took from here and there to help all of us understand. I'm sorry, I'm going to do it in a very, I'm not, computers are not my thing. So I'm going to keep going back and forth. Yeah, because I don't know how else to do this. Um, as I move from slide to slide. All right, you should be able to see my next slide so we can get the definitions. So I think I should also say, if you've come in because you have a child that has neurodivergence, um, please understand. I just want to define things. Um, so when I say neurotypical, uh, understand that there is, it's exactly that. That it it's to differentiate because there's a movement, ne, that's trying to say uh, all of us are normal and we're the same, but we're not, and that's why we're having this conversation. So I want us to understand the differences so that we know what to do about it as we interact in the world. Because a lot of people feel very awkward when they see a child who's like a certain age and they're expecting certain things from that child, and that child is not able and they don't know. And so the situation becomes awkward for the parents. They don't know what to say, and that's why we're having this conversation. So I will make a distinction between neurotypical and neurodivergence. Okay. And then here you see there's no neurodivergence. We will diverse. We will talk about that. That's a third definition. So there's three: neurotypical, neurodivergent, and then neurodiverse. So somebody who's neurotypical is an individual who has expected or normal patterns according to what we understand in society. So their cognition, in terms of how they think. So you see a 4-year-old and you start engaging with them, and you're thinking, oh wow, okay, this is a 4-year-old. You hear how, because there is an expected and a normal pattern that you would expect to engage with a child according to a certain age. And also, so it's how they think, it's how they socialize, how we behave. We can be said we're neurotypical. Um, and we, each one of us, we develop these skills, social skills, organizational skills, at a similar pace to peers. And that's why I mentioned the ages. There's something you expect for a child who's 1, and a child who's 3, a child who's 7, somebody who's 15, somebody who's 20. So there's an expectation at every age to have certain cognition, certain way of thinking, certain social interactions, and certain kinds of behavior. And the people who fit into that expected or normal pattern are said to be neurotypical, right? And such people generally are able to handle changes in routine, in disruptions, in distractions without difficulty. So you may be a little bit annoyed that, oh, I was busy with my presentation and then something happened. But then you're able to come back and just focus again on that. So that is what a neurotypical individual is like. I hope that makes sense. So you have a normal or expected pattern for your age in terms of your thinking, how you socialize, how you behave, and you've developed these skills over time at a set pace according to where it is you're supposed to be. And then you're also able to deal with anything that comes in and disrupts your routine and distractions without much difficulty. Now, someone who's a neurodivergent, and this is an umbrella, and that's why we're not just talking about ADHD, because then we're going to have many topics on things that fall under this umbrella. So we're explaining the umbrella, and then I will show you the different conditions, and then you can see the conditions are just labels, but this one gives us a general overview. So it's an umbrella that encompasses individuals whose neurology or neurological experiences, they differ from the societal norm. So you're meeting a 1-year-old or a 3-year-old who doesn't talk, they don't walk. So you're going to be thinking, oh, what's going on? Because it is not the expected for their child. It is not a normal pattern for their child. And it's important to understand they are neurodivergent. It does not necessarily mean there's anything wrong. That child could just have a delayed milestone. And that's also something very different. But they are neurodivergent because for their age, right? That's what the other one says. For their age, they don't have a normal pattern. But you need to understand, is it just delayed or is there something else that is ongoing? Right? So they differ from what is expected and what is the societal norm. And it includes conditions like these ones. I will go back into them. And neurodivergent individuals may have unique ways, they do tend to have unique ways of processing information, right? Of communicating and interacting with the world. So you'll see you say things to a neurodivergent individual, and you're realizing that how they're thinking about it, how they're understanding it, or even how they respond and how they communicate is very different from what is expected and what is normal. And I will keep emphasizing expected and normal because that is how we gauge that this is typical, right? This is the expected norm. This is atypical. This is neurodivergent. Is there a delay or is there a neurological abnormality or deficiency or what is going on? And that's what we're trying to understand. I hope it makes sense. But we can always go back. Just let me run through all of the slides first, and then we will take it from there afterwards. Unless, of course, you've got a burning question, Brother Bukosi. But allow me. It's only a few slides that I'm sharing. Oh, I must come back here and stop sharing. Bear with me. This is the best way I can do this thing. So now what I want us to understand, now I'm bringing in another one. So we spoke about neurotypical. Say it to yourself, Nick. Neurotypical, expected norm in terms of how a person thinks, how a person learns, how they process information, and how they interact with the world and behavior. This is what you're seeing on another person. Neurodivergent, they are not. It's not the expected norm, right? And then we're talking about neurodiverse, okay? And humanity is neurodiverse. No two neurotypical people are the same, and no two neurodivergent people are the same. All of us are neurodiverse. All of us are very different in how we process information, in how we interact with the world, in how we understand things, in how we feel about things. all of us are neurodiverse. Okay, it's a whole spectrum. We each process information, we each communicate, we each interact with the world very, very differently. Oh, okay. This thing is seems to be working just fine now. All right. Now, the parts of the brain that are involved that cause us to be neurodiverse, that cause us to be neurotypical, that cause us to be neurodivergent. All of this is happening because of something that's happening in our brain. And I will show you the picture so that you know. But it's the cerebellum, which is at the back of the head, right? This is involved in motor control, in movement. And I want you to be thinking with me as I'm presenting this. So if the cerebellum is involved in being neurotypical or neurodiverse, right? And the cerebellum is involved in movement, in how you process sensations, in how you think and how you behave, then obviously if something goes wrong in a neurodivergent whose cerebellum is affected, their movement is going to be affected, right? How they process sensation is going to be different, how they think is going to be different, and the social behavior is going to be different. That's why I don't want you to try and memorize what happens in ADHD, what happens in ADD, what happens in OCD, what happens in all of these different conditions. I want you to think, okay, there's a part of the brain that's affected. You can take a picture of the slide, you can always come back and think, if movement is affected, maybe the cerebellum is affected. If the cerebellum is affected, movement will be affected, sensation will be affected, a little bit of thinking and social behavior will be affected, right? And then there's another part of the brain, the amygdala, or amygdala, uh, which is for processing especially emotions, emotions like fear. Are you seeing the same slide as me? Yeah. Emotions like fear, pleasure, and aggression. So you can imagine that if this part of the brain is affected, somebody is not going to be able to process their emotions correctly. What I mean correctly, I mean they're not going to be able to process the emotions according to the expected norms. As a parent, you now see that this child seems to be very emotional, or this child shows no emotions at all, right? This child seems to show no pleasure in anything, right? And I'll give examples later on. Or this child seems to be become very aggressive very easily when they don't get their way, and it's difficult to calm them down. It's outside the norm because kids can be like that, but this is outside the norm. Then you know that okay, the amygdala has been affected. And then there's the basal ganglia, which is a group of structures that's involved in also motor control, executive functioning, but especially in reward processing. All right. So they may be run and governed, and these are part of the limbic system. So you may find that the child is really, really more governed by their limbic system, by their emotional brain, rather than their thinking brain, and they're not able to self regulate, they're not able to self soothe, they're not able to self control because these parts of the brain either are hyperactive or you find that they show no kinds of emotion because these are hypo, they are under functioning, right? And then there's a part of the brain that connects the two hemispheres, the two sides of the brain. We've got two sides to the brain. And then there's the prefrontal cortex, or in the frontal lobe, which is the one that really is involved in executive functioning and things like motivation as well, and eye movements. So if any of these structures is affected, how the child interacts with the world, how the child processes information, processes emotions, processes sensation is going to be affected. You find that the child doesn't like to be touched, and you're thinking, what's wrong with this child? But it's how that feeling of being touched affects them, right? That it instead of releasing chemicals like oxytocin to make them feel calm, they cringe at that. And so one has to be able to navigate that and understand that they're not choosing to be that way. The part of the brain that processes that is not working the way it is expected in a normal way, the way it was designed to be able to function and work. Right. Now we need to understand something called neurodevelopment. Has my slide changed? I don't think so. It doesn't look that way. Yeah.
Yes, it just shows.
All right. All right. There we go. Neurodevelopment. So always break the word into neuro development. It's a process of how the nervous system, and when I talk about the nervous system, I'm talking about the brain and the spinal cord. Remember, this is the control center of your entire being, right? It governs how we show up in the world. So it's very important, right? So neurodevelopment is a process by which this system is formed, first and foremost. So where is it formed? When the woman is pregnant in the womb, right? How it's formed, how it develops. So when a child is born, this system must develop. If we can kindly just mute ourselves, that would allow my cognition to be able to focus. All right. So neurodevelopment is a process of how the nervous system forms when the baby's in the womb, develops, right, and matures from conception right through childhood to early adulthood. Because we say that the brain is fully developed at the age of 25, and then from then on it's like you just go on using it roughly. Like now remember, even with these ages, because we're all neurodiverse, we're not all going to be on the same schedule, right? So neurodevelopment is about the generation, which is the formation, the shaping, and the reshaping of the brain. Remember that the brain is never remains the same, right? You have one brain when you're formed, and depending on the experiences that one has, it shapes and then it's reshaping. It's like a tree. You can leave a tree to grow and it's going to be wild, or you can prune it and shape it in a certain way. Same thing with neuro. That's what neurodevelopment is about, and that's important for us to remember that how we interact with every child, whether neurotypical or neurodiverse, is going to reshape that brain. And we want to be conscious, but that's not the word I'm looking for. We want to be um, intentional about how we want to shape that brain, because we know it can, because of two properties of the brain: neurogenesis, the ability to grow new nerves, and neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire the brain. It's been shown that kids are beautiful. If you take out one part, there was the research has shown for children who have seizures, at a certain age, if you can remove one hemisphere, they can function just fine with another hemisphere. All the brain does is it just creates new places to form and to wire, so that that ability can be manifested. So so even if your child is given a diagnosis of a neurodevelopmental condition, right, it's important to understand that that brain can be reshaped, and so that we can, even if it's not imperfection, we can develop certain abilities that they were not expected to have. So that's why we're having this conversation. Um, our neurodevelopment impacts how we think. I've said this, how we feel, how we learn. And that's important, because then we take all neurotypical children to one school and all neurodivergent children to one school, when I've said that we're all neurodiverse. So the learning environment is also very important. And our neurodevelopment also impacts how we interact with the world. So you can imagine having a neurodivergent child and you try to keep them away, because this is the truth. A lot of people feel shame that my child is not like other children. So you seclude them and you keep them away from other people, and so their interaction with the world is limited. Not that you should be taking them out everywhere, because some children cannot handle that, but it's important to be balanced and understand that if they are not allowed to be stimulated in the right way in interacting with the world, then you set them out at the age of 12 into a world they have never interacted with. They might just not be ready, but maybe you can help them learn how they're going to interact with the world with the kind of brain that they have, understanding that their experiences are going to do what? To reshape that brain so that perhaps they can do things better. They did. So just because you took a child to a store, it's like with a neurotypical and a neuro divergent child the first time, and they had a tantrum, you're like, this child is never going to go to the store. That's not necessary. You need to see how can we reshape the brain so that they know that in this social setting, this is how we behave. That's what um, the that's what their education, their learning should be about. Um, and our neurodevelopment is impacted by one genetics. So something like trisomy 21, I forget the name, it's in the other Down syndrome, is because of genetics. There is a genetic abnormality at chromosome 21. And so a child is born with that neurodevelopmental condition. So genetics can affect that. Environment, and look at the environment. It really has a lot to do with the mother. Prenatal, perinatal, and postnatal. Prenatal, before a woman gets pregnant, so the mother's health, whether they are using any substances, be it illicit drugs, medication, yes, medication, social drugs like alcohol and cigarettes. If the mother is suffering from a lot of infections or having a lot of stress, that will affect the neurodevelopment of that baby. Right? So, mothers, it's important that you be healthy even before you fall pregnant. And unfortunately, a lot of women only find out they're pregnant early as 2 weeks after conception, and some right up to way later. They discover that they are pregnant. So, they may have been continuing with illicit drugs or medication or eating junk food or getting infections or being stressed and not realizing the impact that it's having on the baby's brain as it's developing. Um, Perinatal issues that can affect the neurodevelopment, the same things as above, the mother's health, if they are still using substances, if they're getting infections, if they are stressed, right? If a child is born prematurely, even if the mother was healthy, that will affect neurodevelopment. If a child is born with a low birth weight, if there are complications, or if there's any diseases that the mother have, and if there are complications during birth itself, maybe it was a prolonged labor, there was stress during delivery, um, the and even if the child was delivered incorrectly and nerves were pulled in that setting, so perinatal issues as well. And then postnatally, this is like lifestyle, nutrition, social and emotional support, sleep, right? Physical activity, we're a generation where our kids sit down and watch TV, right? We'll see the importance of physical activity. Exposure to toxins postnatally. And I don't know if I should talk about, I think I will talk about it now, even though it is a controversy. Um, a lot of mothers will tell you, my child was developing just fine. And then they got that 18-month injection, right? Vaccine. And then the child regressed. The milestones that they had, they started regressing. Mothers, though as a medical doctor, this is not something we're supposed to talk about because we're supposed to encourage mothers to give their children vaccines. It's important. And I will share the link on the group, brother Mpo, just remind me. Where there are other people that have been trying to do research on the impact of vaccines, especially on autism, but on any neurodevelopmental condition. And the experts in the ones who have been saying everybody should vaccinate their kids, they themselves, you watch the whole interview, I think it's about 30 minutes long. They admit that there are no studies to show that vaccinations does not cause autism, but there are no studies that shows that it causes it. So we don't know. And the question they were asked is, why don't you conduct these studies? And it doesn't seem to be something that they want to do. So we need to think carefully, because if there's mercury, and it's a toxin in the vaccines, and if they cause, and we know, we suspect that they cause inflammation in the brain, these vaccines, they're going to affect your neurodevelopment. So you could have been healthy, you could have been eating well, and then at that 18-month injection, then your child regresses and you start seeing these things and they say no, it's because autism is picked up after the age of 2. So just be mindful. Infections and stress as well. Lifestyle, gut microbiome. The gut microbiome is important because that means that children who are born via cesarean section, whose gut is not colonized by good bacteria, could also have, even if it's mild, neurodevelopmental issues because they don't get the bacteria that they're supposed to get in the gut because they don't get to swallow that when they're delivered normally. And then social factors, socioeconomic status, an environment, is it an abusive environment, was there molestation? All of these things is going to affect the child because the brain does not grow and the nerves do not wire together in a stressful environment. So that's important. All right. Now, let's have a look at the brain from birth to adulthood. This is what needs to happen to the brain. So let's say you have a child now. The child is born, right? Whether they're neurotypical or neurodiverse, this is what needs to happen. Um, you see, the brain is 90% fully developed by the age of 3, 4, right? And then 10% is over the rest of the time. So 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 infanthood is a very important time for brain development. So that's why it is critical that we get it right, especially in the first 5 years of life, that we get it right. So the first phase is sensory motor phase, where the child interacts with the world using their senses. So if they're not able to see or they can't hear or there's nobody touching them, they can't develop these things. So you see that it's important. It's important to be looking at your baby and doing movements and smiling so that their brain can be stimulated, whether your child is neurotypical or neurodiverse. But obviously, if these senses are affected, so if your child can't see, if your child can't hear, then obviously then this development is going to be affected. And how the brain works is the senses and the movement, they are an essential foundation for all the other phases that are coming along. So, and the reason I focus on this is we are so obsessed with our children being able to read, Nick, that we hurry through the phases. It's important to give the right stimulation at the right time. You wanting your child to be reading by the age of 3, you are doing for them that which they're supposed to be doing later. And so you are not working with how the brain is developing. You're trying to fast track it and you put a stress onto the brain. So from the age of 0 to 2, it really is about sensory motor, right? Using their senses and then movements. They roll, they sit, they crawl, they walk. Don't hurry them along, all right? Because, like I said, some of them may have delays. Just encourage them. Just say, okay, I need my child to be able to use their senses and I need my child to be able to use their body, whether they're neurotypical or neurodiverse. Because what are you doing? You're shaping and you're reshaping this brain to give it the best chance of it developing the way it's supposed to develop, having looked at the other things, right? And then at the next phase, from the age of 2 to about 5, it's about language, memory, and problem solving. So that means you needed to have been talking to the child so that they learn to hear sounds, right? And then this memory center starts to develop where you've been saying nah nah, and they start vocalizing. So they'll start doing gestures and vocalizing, and then the words are going to come. All right. Um, but hopefully we're saying that that part of the brain must also be healthy and intact. But if it's not, if there's a deficit, if there's a problem with a certain part of the brain, then you will see delays. And if not delays, you might see that these things do not develop. um, right? And then from learning and memory and problem solving, then going forward, really it's not an issue. There's operational phase, pre-operational phase, operational phase. That's not what the topic is here, because a lot of neurodevelopmental issues would have been picked up before the age of 7, before the age of 5. Actually, normally from the age of 2, unless it's motor issues, which is movement issues, because you see that movement is there very early on, or sensory issues, because you see that in the, so if it's a sensory motor issue, right? So the cerebellum and where memory, where senses are processed, you will see it before the age of 2. If it's cognition issues, right, you will see it probably after the age of 2. But with other neurodevelopmental conditions, there may be a face associated with it. So a child with cerebral palsy, you'll be able to see them almost immediately because you'll see how they're holding their hand. It would be spastic, it's contracted, it's not moving normally. And a child with Down syndrome, they will have a certain face that is of a Down uh, syndrome child. But other children may look normal, and then only after the age of 2, because their senses and their movements are normal, but then you only realize later on that their vocalization and gestures and words are not coming. And so you need to find out what is then that condition that is happening. So things like autism and ADHD and ADD, those are the conditions that come afterwards. All right. I'm almost there. And so I spoke about the cerebellum, which is right at the back. So these are the parts that can be affected. So you see the basal ganglia. It's for motivation, for reward, and for forming habits. So you may find if this part is affected, that the child shows no motivation, and that normally has to do with dopamine issues, right? The child may show no pleasure, or they may only show pleasure when they are hyper stimulated, right? So the basal ganglia, it releases dopamine and opioids. It's about positive reinforcement. So if you see that there's no motivation, I actually saw a guy. He said from the age of 7 they knew that something wasn't quite right with him, but so basically what he needed to be motivated was to have high dopamine and high adrenaline. So he would ride his motorbike at like high speed, and then he would release dopamine just to feel normal, not to feel high. And with him, I said probably if we did a scan we wouldn't see much, but his dopamine receptors on his brain were not working properly, so he was not. It required a lot to motivate him. And he said, he found jobs very boring. Communicating with people was just, it wasn't easy. He was not motivated to do a lot of things, and he was worried that he needed to do these high extra things to be able to focus and to be motivated, because he wasn't getting the rewards. So his basal ganglia wasn't working properly. That's what I'm saying. Um, and then there's a stress control center, which is the amygdala, which can be affected. This is flight, fight, or free center. This is where negative emotions come from. It releases stress hormones. And often this one is from, when children grew up in a stressful environment. And bear with me, a stressful environment could be waking up early every day to be dropped off at a facility with strangers and other kids, and your caregiver is nowhere to be seen. And this is what we do to our kids every day when we send them from the age of, before 2. We're sending them to creche because we must go back to work. Just bear with me. Just understand that it is stress. In the same way that you get stressed by going to work every day, your child gets stressed when they get dropped off in an environment that they don't know. And this stress control center, they start releasing stress hormones. And this is at a critical phase when their brain is developing. So these children may tend to have anxiety. So it's important to understand these things so that when we make decisions with a child whose brain is developing, I think at the very least we should wait until the age of 7 when their brain is 90% formed. But this is why we're presenting it, so you can make informed decisions. And then the prefrontal cortex, which is fully developed by the age of 25. So that's something else. This is the stop and go. It's about integrating everything. So if you can imagine, if the prefrontal cortex is not well developed, a child will not be able to integrate uh, your instructions with how they're feeling about it. And so and then maybe they don't even have a way to communicate. They don't have that language ability. So they feel frustrated, they feel they can't express themselves, and then they throw a tantrum, and you then beat them. And then it's like, I don't even understand. The child in their brain, it's like, we don't even understand what just happened because we're feeling these things. They were not able to integrate it. So you just look like a violent person because this child is not integrating all of these things. And then when they see you, now you are a source of stress. So it's important to understand that how we interact with the children we need to understand what is happening in their brain, right? So the prefrontal cortex, we're supposed to teach children to be able to integrate their emotions, instructions, to be able to think and be able to make decisions. This is where GABA is released. GABA slows things down, and glutamate gives you the go. That's why I call it the stop and go. This is about self-regulation. And unfortunately, a lot of neurodivergent children really struggle with this self-regulation. But as I said, because this is the last thing to develop, it can be developed because, like I said, the brain can be shaped and reshaped and remodeled. I think I've just have two more slides, and then I will be done. So this is what we're talking about. Neurodiversity. It's the entire spectrum of different brain differences. So all of us on this platform, we're neurodiverse. Your family members, they're neurodiverse. No two brains are the same. We don't process things the same. We don't feel things the same. We don't act the same. But your behavior may be accepted as a normal pattern for what happened. And then from this neurodiversity, you have people that we can say, okay, these are neurotypical, right? How they act in societies, what is expected, this is the expected norm. And then you have your neurodivergence. But you see, even with your neurodivergence, you have a diverse group in neurodivergence. Okay. Now let's look at, because we all like to put labels to conditions. What are the common neurodivergent conditions? Autism, which is a spectrum, because the kids are not all the same. Their social interactions are affected, communication and behavior. That's what happens with autism. ADHD, there's difficulties with paying attention, right? Sitting down and paying attention, and then hyperactivity and impulsivity. When they don't have hyperactivity and impulsivity, it's called ADD, attention deficit disorder. So they can't sit down and pay attention. And a lot of kids are being diagnosed with attention deficit disorder when it's just that they don't want to be sitting in the class. They are restless. They just want to go out into a field and run and explore, which is what children are supposed to be doing. That's what their brain is saying. I'm supposed to be children doing. Your legs are restless because you want to go and use them and use your body. So you'll find that a child who living in a flat is destroying the flat. When you set them out into a country living home, they don't destroy anything. They're happy. They're in the garden. They're working. They're functional. So be mindful before your child is diagnosed. And I say this because I see a lot of parents who come to me and they've been to the neurologist and neurosurgeon. They've got scans done and they've been to an occupational therapist, and there's a whole list of everything that is wrong with their child, right? And I'm like, your child is 4. Like, allow this child, okay, I see what they're saying. They're not neurotypical, but perhaps it's just a delay. Perhaps it's because they're in an environment where they don't feel safe and secure to express themselves, so they're not showing these things. So it's important that you know your child, and you help your child, so that they don't end up with a label that they don't really deserve. Then there's cerebral palsy, which affects movement and muscle tone and posture. So that's the cerebellum. So that will be picked up very early on from as soon as a child is born, we tend to notice this. Down syndrome, which is characterized by intellectual disability, and also the face. I didn't put it there. There's a facial characteristics. Tourette syndrome, it's involuntary movements and vocalization, sensory processing differences. So these other ones going down, they are really about, there are more symptoms, right? They struggle with processing sensations, like light and sound and touch, and even food. You'll find that a child will not eat food that is clumpy because in their mouth it's like, blah, blah. That doesn't mean they'll never eat that food. As they learn to experience different textures, then they'll be able to. You'll find that they don't like how something feels against them, but over time, as you expose to them to different sensations, they can learn to be able to say, okay, this is not anything. Their brain will wire to say this is normal, this is acceptable. But it may take longer for one child than for another. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is recurring unwanted thoughts and repetitive behaviors. Anxiety disorder. So you can see that is in the extended amygdala, where negative emotions are coming, including social anxiety, right? Dyslexia, which is difficulty with reading and spelling, dyspraxia or developmental coordination disorder, where they're uncoordinated, so it affects their daily activities. Dyscalculia, which is about numbers and mathematics, and dysgraphia, which is about writing. So these are some of the common neurodivergent conditions. I believe as time goes, we'll keep attaching names. And that's why I said you just need to look at the child, say how their senses, their motor, their language, their behavior, their memory, their social interactions, how are they interacting with the world? And then you will know if they tend to have neurodivergent tendencies. I think I will leave it there because the last one is about the laws of health that affects the brain. But maybe I should, so that then I can leave. I think Sister Khotato is going to focus more on. So you have this child, you've understood this. How are you going to raise this child? I wanted us to understand what is happening in the mind of that child. So maybe I should just share this slide and then I'm done, and you're free. So because it happens in the brain, so that we're talking about the brain formation, right? Yeah, we can see it. There are laws that govern the body, and they also affect the brain. I spoke about sleep. Rest is important because it allows the neurons to relax, to repair, to remove toxins, and for memory consolidation. So even in a child, then sleep becomes important. That's why babies sleep a lot, because their brain is developing. And you will see when they're going through growth, but their sleep is also affected. You want to try and get them to be sleeping properly. So when children are not having that nice little routine of it's time for them to sleep, then their brains will not be developing properly. Physical activity, I don't even want to call it exercise. Physical activity for children is important because blood will flow to the brain, oxygen and nutrients will go there. They'll release endorphins, they'll allow for neurogenesis, so new brain cells to develop. BDNF, which is like manure for your brain. So it's important. Children need physical activity, to be running around, to be cycling, to be jumping, to be active, to be just take them everywhere with you. Allow them to be outside and play. Sunlight is important. It helps them develop this circadian rhythm where they know it's nighttime, so they're releasing melatonin so they can go to sleep. It's important. They release serotonin. Um, it increases their alertness. Vitamin D, which is for their bone strength, for general health anyway. And then we need to teach children to learn temperance, right? But we must be temperate on their behalf initially. Avoid anything that's going to be harmful to the neurons. And one of my pet hates is 2-minute noodles, which are loaded with MSG and sugary things that parents feed to the children, and toothpaste with fluoride. So we need to be mindful of the things that we're giving our children that are harmful to their brain. We don't need to introduce sugar and sweets and cakes and unhealthy ones. That's what I mean. And that's why on this platform, there's always things like cooking classes, so that you can know how to make cook the right kind of food for the developing brain. All right. Oxytocin is about love, attachment, and security. Children need that, need that, need that. What do most of us do? We put them over there, we give them a tablet, we give them a phone, we give them the TV, we give them the remote. We don't give them us, which is who they want, because it helps the neurons mature, it helps with the rewiring of the brain circuit, it helps them release oxytocin, which makes them feel bonded. They're not releasing negative emotions, negative chemicals, which then is going to affect the developing brain. So it's important. Water is the beverage of choice for children, right? So they need that. We need to start with the other things that we're giving our kids, unless you're introducing them to nice herbal teas and your peppermint and your to just help them calm down. Getting fresh air that they will get from being outside, right? We need to be inculcating in them true beliefs, because their brain is being wired. So if they're being educated by the television to believe wrong things, we're gonna have a lot of work to do later on, to take those things out. So truth in terms of they need to understand this is the right things to eat, this is the right time to eat. So you're putting into their subconscious mind certain habits that are truthful and that help support them in their own development. They need to know that we don't eat sweets, right? So that even when they go out and we don't drink fizzy drinks and we don't eat those kind of cakes, right? And you will see your child will go out there and they will be offered these things. I'll be like, no, we don't eat that. So it's important to teach them the true things. We don't sit and watch TV all day. We go out and play. Inculcate those truths into your child's mind. And obviously, nature is where they should be learning. Let's not be hasty to be teaching children from books. They need to go out and learn from nature, and the book that you use is the Bible. Tell them Bible stories, right? Let that become, because there's lessons in there as well, and help with their imagination as well. It goes with food as well. Help them, because they're also starting to feel things and they're releasing chemistry. It's important that when a child is angry, you not just say, don't be angry. You help them acknowledge and learn what that emotion is. When children can vocalize about what it is they are feeling, the emotion they're feeling, when they can put a name to it, and then you can say, oh, you're feeling angry, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling sad. Yes, it's normal to feel sad, right? And then you teach them how they deal with those emotions. But first, we acknowledge them, because they must learn to recognize them, right? And then integrate, process them, and then integrate them, and then regulate them. It's a process that they must learn. And then outfits, but I see kids with hairstyles and things pulling on their heads. Affecting the brain temperature and blood flow, and people relaxing their children. Say the scalp is so delicate. So let's just be mindful. Let kids be kids, and let's not cause unnecessary increased blood flow, and blood temperature, to the scalp, and irritation. And then nutrition. A whole food plant-based diet is the best for feeding the brain, because meat is inflammatory, sugar is addictive. We're laying a foundation for cocaine addiction, because sugar addiction and cocaine addiction have been shown to be the same. I will leave it there, because I'm sure we're going to reiterate these points. But this is what I wanted to share with everybody about neurotypical and neurodivergent brain.
Thank you very much, Doc. We really appreciate it. I think there's a lot of questions on what you have presented. With me, I think there's a lot of assignment that I've just received. Probably some of the things we'll have to discuss it outside the platform. But yeah, I'm looking at my time there. It's almost 8 o'clock, and I wouldn't want to rush Sister Khutaso on the discussion. But anyway, she can decide what will work best. But I would want to give it enough time to really deal with the subject fairly, as to how do you prepare yourself psychologically if you have such a condition, the changes that you will have to make, how do you approach, and probably looking at the things like if you will need any intervention from a specialist, where to go. So, Sister Khudat, I want to check. Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Are you
also
there?
sitting here thinking about it. It's not gonna work tonight. It's not gonna work. So my proposition is we have part two, where we can really it's a lot of important information that I also don't want to pressure myself to go over, because it's one thing for parents to listen to a chunk that they cannot do much about. So I would want them to be able to really have a proper understanding, to understand what they need to do, the how to do it, and all these other things, so that they can be thoroughly equipped, not just with, like I think the doc said, not just with the neurodivergent child, but with any type of child that they have, especially these ones, because the counsels would be beneficial for every individual. So I think let's do part two.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Because that
Yeah.
was my thinking. So I wanted to check your availability for those for that. Because for now, what we can do is that if there's anyone that has a question specifically to Doc, they can then ask those questions. And then
Absolutely.
when we meet next time, we are dealing with the psychological aspect of it, probably the social issues as well. So at least we can
It's
better prepare.
actually, just to give a brief on it, I was surprised how much the Bible has on the subject.
Mm.
And there are a lot of spiritual aspects to it. And because I work in this field, I work with a lot of parents that have been through this and that are going through it. I know the psychological toll this condition can have on a family, right? And so it's mainly more a psycho-spiritual approach, and more than anything, my desire is to support the supporter. We become very, of which is good to focus on the child, but the child needs a very strong support system. And it's basically to provide the resources that the parents would need, spiritually, mentally, and then of course, physiologically, to be able to carry this sometimes for the rest of their lives.
That's
Yeah.
100%. I totally agree with you on that one. So let's agree on part 2. But in the meantime, I think we can just look at the
Do a Q&A.
questions that,
Yeah.
yes, there are 2 questions that I actually see here. I'll also take the hands for those that would want to just speak directly to Doc. But there are 2 questions that are there. The first question to Doc is vaccination. Vaccinations were mentioned that parents should be careful when it comes to them, specifically the 18th month one. However, since no scientific evidence is available regarding their negative impact, how then should parents be careful, and what must parents look out for in terms of signs? That's question number 1. Question number 2, can a neurodivergent kid be treated to be neurotypical?
All right. So I will start with the second question. It depends. So children who are born prematurely, right? They may be.
May,
Sorry.
just for a second, may I request that we mute ourselves? Brother Paul, may you please assist?
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. As I said, it it depends. If a child is has neurodevelopmental delays because they were born prematurely, right? Initially, they will appear neurodivergent, but they can catch up because it was simply, especially if the right environment is provided. So the nutrition is right, the bonding is right, there's love and security, they're not put under duress. Um, you understand? Then that child can come to an age where they in all sense and purposes they appear neurotypical because there was never any genetic factors and there was never any abnormalities necessarily in the brain where somebody has a cerebral palsy and trisomy 21, or what do you call it, Down syndrome, sorry, Dr. Z, Down syndrome, which where there's a genetic problem or there is damage to a certain part of the brain. They may never necessarily be neurotypical, but you can ensure that the condition doesn't get worse. Because children with cerebral palsy, remember, there's nothing wrong with their muscle, right? That's not why they're here. There's nothing wrong with the muscle itself. The problem is that part of the brain that controls this muscle is not working well. So if they undergo physiotherapy recurrently, they can learn to have a certain kind of movement. It's like somebody who had a stroke, so to speak, because that part of the brain is damaged, and that's why they become like that. So the right treatment at the very beginning is important to bring them to as normal functioning a part that was an ability as possible. But some no, some the defect is genetic. The defect is and I'm not talking from what God can do. I'm talking from what us physically as men we can do. I remember I saw a mother. She says the child started regressing from the age of about 2, which leads to the next question. After that vaccination, the child stopped movement and they stopped talking. And she was praying a lot because she had prayed for a son after 4 girls, and now she had a son. And this child was not talking. They were not. They became. They went from being neurotypical to being neurodiverse, divergent, right? Um, and she was, because she's an Adventist, she put this child on a plant-based diet. They were following the laws of health, and she saw the child started speaking late at the age of 7, but she's been teaching him to self-regulate. You can still see that they are, because he's about 12 now. You can still see certain deficits, but he's functioning in society, because that's what you want. You hope to be able to do, to bring them to their best ability. I think Sister Khotato is going to say it better. And my apologies, Sister Khotato, for taking so long. I just thought it was important for people to understand what is happening, so that even with our expectations, there are normal expectations. I have a friend who was, boom, it was such a shock for him to have a child with cerebral palsy, and autism, the first child, and his entire life had to change. And he had to learn and understand this child and create an environment that would allow him to get to his best ability. Now, his best ability is him being able to just basically do things for himself, under supervision, brush his teeth at the age of 17, under supervision, having. But this child, as Sister Hotato said, this child is going to need support for the rest of their own life. So the father, he understands that. He's made peace with that. He's very dependent on God on the journey, because he needs himself to be strong and understanding, and he has understood how the child interacts with the world. That the things that are important to the world are not important to this child. So where other people are like, oh my goodness, this child is throwing tantrums. This child is not caring about how people are seeing him. But so it's important to understand and not try. I think that's where I'm going, and not try to make your neurodivergent child neurotypical, because then you are going to be forcing the issue and saying this child must, and they must, and they must. But I'm not saying that you should leave things be. You want to help them develop. Am I making sense? You want to help them develop as much as possible, increase their ability, understanding neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, but also being mindful of what is the deficit. Is it genetic? Is it that the brain is abnormal and there isn't much that can be done about it? And knowing that there's a limit beyond which they won't be able to go. But see what you can do, especially in the first 5 years. If a person can learn to be independent and look after themselves and cook for themselves and do those kind of activities, good. But if you can push them and their brain is able to develop along, do that way. When it comes to the issue of vaccines, that's a whole presentation on its own. And I'm sure I have done a presentation on childhood vaccinations. So the impact, all we have been told that these vaccinations are important to make sure that the children don't get infections, right? Um, that is the argument. Um, but since the introduction of mandatory vaccines, we cannot run away from, it could be coincidence, but we cannot run away from the fact that the rate of, especially autism, skyrocketed when mandatory vaccinations were implemented. And autism, strange enough, tends to be diagnosed after that 18-month injection. And a lot of parents will tell you, I had a child who was developing and hitting every milestone, and they got that vaccine. So the question, I've put it on the link, just listen to listen to the experts that push for mandatory vaccination, and listen as they are being asked questions, because on the their stance is that vaccines do not cause autism, right? But there has not been any study to show that vaccines do not cause autism. And there has not been any study to show that vaccines cause autism. So there's no study for either or. Now, as a parent, you need to then educate yourself and make an informed decision. There's a movement across the world for parents not vaccinating their kids. And they're saying, oh, but your kids are going to get sick, and there are parents who have raised their children and they haven't got sick. You look at the Mormons, you look at the parents around you that have chosen to not vaccinate their kids, because even when you listen to the video, you will hear that children who are vaccinated tend to have more allergic rhinitis, which is a runny nose. But then also, it's because we are vaccinating the kids, because you're taking young kids and putting them with other young kids and exposing them to infections that they were not designed to be exposed to. Children who go to creche are sick all the time because they're being bombarded. Their immune system, which is not fully developed, is being bombarded all the time with infections that they should not be. So we have created a system that's creating problems, and our solutions are potentially creating problems. And so, as a parent, you need to inform yourself to say, is it possible that vaccines can cause neurodevelopmental issues? And then you need to be able to make your decision as to what you're going to do if you think that they do that, right? You can read books such as The Vaccine Crisis. Um, I personally went on this journey when I was a medical student, when I was vaccinated for hepatitis B, that I started questioning the validity of vaccinations, of bypassing part of the immune system, your skin, to inject something into the body and forcing the immune system to deal with something. I've never had chicken pox. They want to vaccinate me for chicken pox. Why? When I have dealt with people with chicken pox and I've never gotten it. Now you want to bypass my skin and put other things in there. I don't know what kind of response that's going to have on the body. But then they're saying, but what about childhood immunizations? But it's like, is it necessary? What was happening before? For that, you need to listen to me when I present on the history of vaccinations and where they came from, and how before we were handling these issues. And I will say it categorically, I am not for vaccination. I can say that as a medical doctor. Whenever I work in a practice that's not mine, I inform them that I do not vaccinate children. Parents who come and they want to be vaccinated with whatever they want to be vaccinated with, I don't have a problem. That's your decision. But for me, I do not vaccinate children, because having done my own study as a doctor who was trained to believe in vaccination, I have decided that I am not comfortable with the safety profile of vaccination for children who are developing, and they can make their own decision later on as to whether they get vaccinated. Like chickenpox. A child goes and visits other kids at the age of 5, 7, and they get infected with chickenpox. They're fine. They have immunity for life. But when you're vaccinated, your immunity is not for life. It's for a span of about 10 years, and that's why you need boosters. And that has had detrimental effects, because we're having mothers who, by the time they have their children, they don't have the necessary antibodies to pass on to their children to protect them, because they never got the right immunity the right way. They got um, this immunity which is short lived. I don't know if I'm making sense. If you got chickenpox the right way, you can pass on antibodies to your child, right, when you're breastfeeding. But if you were vaccinated and it was only for 10 years and you didn't get your booster shot, you're not going to pass anything on to your children. So we're having these children who are not from the age of 0 to 2, when the immune system is developing, they don't have the antibodies because their mother didn't give them. And then we take these children to a creche where they're with other older children who are now sick, and they infect them, and then they are having these infections, and infections also affect the neurodevelopment. So there's a lot of things that's affecting neurodevelopment, and we need to think about things differently. But I was just presenting the biology of things today, and I think for me, one of the reasons I loved I came into Adventism, it was that it didn't isolate issues. It was that you need to be on a whole foods plant-based diet. You need to be doing country living. You need to be doing homeschooling. All of those things. I know it's not easy because of the system we are brought into, but all of those things protect your children. It means prenatally the mother is healthy, right? Perinatally, you know what it is that you're doing and you're not under stress and duress because you're trusting in God, right? Maybe I can go again through those laws of health, because truth is also about knowing that truth is a person and his name is Jesus Christ, right? And his father is seated on a throne. So we don't need to be stressing. So, and then natally, you know, the environment. So this is child guidance. This is you know, family life. That kind of an environment, if you look at it, it helps our brain to be shaped and reshaped and formed in a certain way. And so that's why it's important to educate ourselves. So read the vaccine crisis. I don't remember who the author is. I can try and find it and also share it on the link. I think there is an electronic copy of it. So it's important for parents to educate themselves before anybody puts anything into their children. Even though for many years it's been said they're safe and they're mandatory, a lot of parents are starting to question it because they're seeing this trend. Um, I think that has
Yeah.
answered the two questions, my brother.
Thank you very much. I think there are two things that I'm picking up. Okay, with the vaccination, well, they are saying there's no evidence, but what has been the observation? I think that's the one question that one should be asking himself. We don't have a scientific evidence of whether they cause it or not, but what are the observations that people are seeing? You can make your decision based on the observations that are around us. Then secondly, as you try to help your child, I think one thing that I picked up is that do the best you can without harming the child. Improve wherever you think there can be improvement, but make sure that you don't harm in trying to correct these things that you may be seeing. Then there's another question here, Doc.
Mhm.
Thank you for this. I have two questions. One, you mentioned fluoride. Toothpaste have an effect on a child's development. Is there a specific toothpaste and brand you recommend that doesn't have fluoride entirely? I didn't like to address, I would like to address the second question directly to the doc, please. Okay, maybe let me give her a platform to actually direct it to you so that you can answer them together at once.
Okay,
Mr. Babata?
thank you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you
Okay,
loud and clear.
thank you. Thank you. I have a daughter. She's a year and 2 months, and it seems her left hand and her left foot have, like, she's so reluctant in using it. She just doesn't want to use her left hand, especially. She just likes to use her right hand to do stuff, and mostly her left hand is always it's she just keeps her left hand. So I don't know if I just want to ask if this is something to do with a physical ailment she got, or that's possibly part of the brain, something that may have happened to her to cause that. If you can address that, please.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll address the second question. I would say have your child assessed properly. But remember, that's why I was pointing out those different things. That sounds like a motor issue. Remember, the first 0 to 2 is about sensory motor development. So they're not using one side. That may be a mild form of cerebral palsy. I don't want to diagnose your child without having looked at them, but I would say seeing a pediatrician or an occupational therapist, they can do assessments to see what is happening. And then what you then do, this is what, once you have a diagnosis, right? Remember that it is The problem is not, this is what I want parents to understand. So the problem is not, is unlikely to be with the muscles there. The problem is that part of the brain that's supposed to stimulate the arm and the leg to move is not doing what it's supposed to do. So in that instance, what you do is you don't leave the situation alone. You start stimulating the hand and the leg, right? Then what that does is there's a two-way communication between the brain and any part. So the between the brain and the arm, there's a two-way communication. So normally what would happen is the brain will send a signal to the hand to say, well, we want to move it, and then the hand will move as it's moving and sending information back. But if the brain is not doing that, you can move the hand, and then that information will travel to the brain, and you keep that doing that enough times, you can, if that part of the brain is damaged in a child of 1 year, all the brain is going to say is, okay, this part is damaged, we're going to reallocate that aspect to another part of the brain. So you want to act now, you want to get the right diagnosis. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I know it's very personal, because I've seen parents who sit and hope and don't have their children assessed because they're just saying, okay, we hope that something is going to happen. Faith without works is dead. Go and have the child assessed, and then let's put together a program to say, how do we stimulate that part of the brain? And if it will not be stimulated, the brain can always allocate that functionality to another part of the brain, so that that part of the brain knows that, oh, this thing is supposed to move like that. So I hope that answers the question. Kosi, give me a brief. What was the first question?
Fluoride,
In my memory.
fluoride on
Oh,
toothpaste.
fluoride. Yes.
Yes.
All right. Phew. Remember I spoke about
Maybe
toxins that.
maybe on that
Mhm.
you might as well tie it with the fillings that they put on the tip, which has mercury.
Yes. So yes, that's what I was saying. Remember, there are toxins. That toxins can definitely impact neurodevelopment, right? So toxins are things like lead, mercury, right? Those are toxins. And then fluoride is not considered to be a toxin because it is actually a mineral that our body needs, but it is in high doses in our water supply. It is in high doses when when it's put in the toothpaste, because it says it's supposed to strengthen our teeth, right? But what fluoride does, one, it affects the brain. That's number one. Number two, it affects actually the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland is very important for growth and development. So a lot of people are having thyroid issues because the fluoride displaces iodine, which is something that we need, and we're not getting enough iodine, actually, funny enough. And even if you are, it may be displaced by fluoride and bromide. These are the other chemicals. So then, what you want to do, uh, with when it comes to fluoride, is the herbal toothpaste where it's written no fluoride. So you can find any of those. There are people who just use charcoal, but I know we don't, we like it when we buy it and it comes in a tube. That's fine. Or you can follow Sister Hotato and she'll teach you how to make your own toothpaste, right? But you can find herbal toothpaste that don't have these extra chemicals, and they don't have added fluoride to it. And then you you also want to be mindful of when we go to the dentist. Now, the question is, why are we going to the dentist a lot? It's often because of what it is that we're eating. Um, in the practice I was in, there was a dentist, and I was horrified to see children under the age of 5 with dental caries. That is purely from what it is they're eating. Okay, let me not say purely. There are kids who tend to have a predisposition because of genetics, but even then, we're feeding the kids a lot of sugary things, a lot of those sticky sweets, jelly tots and jelly babies that stick, and marshmallows that stick to the teeth. And these kids are not really keen into brushing their teeth, right? And then they're eating a lot of junk, and drinking a lot of sodas. And so they end up going to the dentist. And then the dentist is going to do what the dentist is trained to do. They're going to talk about fluoridated toothpaste. They're going to put the fillings that have mercury in them. Mercury is a neurotoxin. So you can imagine that neurotoxin in a child causing developmental issues. And remember what I said, the brain is, you just want to get your child to be physically healthy in the first 5 years. Physically healthy. Forget about all this teaching them how to read and write. You want their physical development to be healthy. The more they're able to use their physical body, the more that lays a solid foundation for their cognition. They will catch up if other kids were reading before. It's fine. You want them to be physically healthy. So avoid things that are going to make your child need to end up going to the dentist. Um, so your sugary things, and then also let's be mindful when we go to the shops, the things we're buying. Not just reading the labels is not just reading about the foods label. It's also reading about the products that we put onto the body, the products that we brush our teeth with, the products that we use on their hair. All of these things can affect their development, and especially their neurodevelopment, because as I said, 90% of the brain is fully done in infancy and childhood, fully developed.
Thank you very much, Doc. I think the details they're already sent for those that would want to have a conversation with Doc. Maybe let me read this last one. Time is not on our side. This will be the last one. Beloved, wait for part 2. Some of these questions will be actually answered on our part 2. So I'm going to read this one, then allow you to answer, then we can close this session. I have a daughter born with GS who's now 4 years old, and she hasn't been to any therapist, and she's still delayed in speech, but can communicate what she needs. She's not yet well potty trained. We are still in the process of it. Now, my question or concern is taking her to a preschool. Is it okay to take her to preschool given the challenges she still has?
All right. The child has what?
DS.
Down syndrome. All right. Okay. There's no one size fits all in terms of the answer, yeah. So let me address principles. So the child has so the face one is different, right? And the development is different. The speech is different, and they're not potty trained. So it's important to know, you want to try and as you're helping them develop, you want to try to get them to be able to use their senses, because that's how they're going to interact with the world. Before we talk about the crash issue, and then you want to try and get them to be able to use their motor development, right? And then with DS, we need to understand that there is a level of intellectual disability that will remain, right? But you will see how where on the spectrum it is. And so senses and motor, right? And then language, expressing self, they might not be able to, they gesture. So when they are with you, they form an attachment with you. They know you as the caregiver, as a person who gives a sense of security and safety, right? And they still haven't learned certain things just to deal with their physical body. Now we take this child to creche, and we're introducing them to a new environment, and you're going to leave this child there. Their emotions are going to be like, where am I? Who am I with? So their amygdala is going to ring. Um, I'm left here. So anxiety, stress. Um, and so that environment is going to cause them a lot of stress, and they cannot even communicate it. So this is all happening internally in their head. Just hear me. Look, I wish part 2 was right now, because Hotato is better at this. I'm good at telling you what is happening. But then we need to see, because as Hotato said, it is true. having a child with these kind of knowing and understanding that they're going to be dependent on you is draining. But maybe they're not having all of these emotional things. You know your child. Perhaps in an environment, because children with Down syndrome actually tend to exhibit a lot of empathy towards other people. So you need to see how they are in an environment with their limited abilities. Are they comfortable if you're taking them to creche? Do they then tend to get along with the teacher? How are they going to handle other kids teasing them? Because kids are like that. But they might not even see it as an issue because, like I said, how they interact with the world, you need to know. So if you tend to see that they're sensitive, you might not want to leave them in that kind of environment. But if you see that they're confident even within themselves, you may. And then you want to look at what they're going to be feeding the child and what stimulation they're going to be giving to the child. Are they going to be physically active? Are they going to be able to express themselves? Am I making sense? So there are a lot of factors you want to look at in making that decision. So it's not just about looking at their condition and then saying, okay, here's a special school, I can take them there. I think it would be important to say, okay, in a new environment, this is how they behave when they're with new people, this is how they are, this is how they interact in the world. And then you want to be very careful whether a child is neurotypical or neurodivergent into the environment you introduce them into, because kids can have experiences who are neurotypical. They can have experiences below the age of 5 that can affect their development for life and who they become. So we want to be mindful of that as well. And I understand, but I think what Kotato is going to cover is when you have a child that is dependent on you and is going to be dependent on you for long, you need to have support because it can be very overwhelming emotionally, it can be very tiring physically, and especially when you don't know what to do. With a child who's crying all the time, you'd be like, what do you want? But you know that there's an end to this because someday they'll be able to speak. But then you're thinking this child will never be able to express themselves. So how is this going to be my life for forever and forever and forever and forever? So it's important to have that psycho-spiritual and social support, so that you know how you're going to navigate. Because I think a lot of people, the reason they end up, taking to crashes, one, financial reasons, people have to work. Number two is that you also get a little bit of a break, but perhaps explore all the possibilities that might be open to you, and then see how you can develop a plan that works for you and your well being and for the well being of your child. As well. I know I didn't give a direct answer, but I can't because I don't know you, I don't know your child, and I don't fully know your situation. But those are the principles I would say needs to be looked at.
Thank you very much, Joko. Really appreciate your time. And also to all our listeners, if you have any challenge that you think you may need to attend to, I will encourage you to seek help from the professionals so that at least they can then deal with the situation specifically according to the understanding or the need of that specific child. So I will encourage you to get the contacts. They're already on the list, on the chat. Get the contacts, communicate with the doctor, and also with Sister Khutazo. I'm sure she'll be dealing with a lot of things that has to do with mental issues. I also encourage you to join us next week as we continue with the discussion. Invite your friends, family members, let them know that there are these discussions. We are really giving these discussions for free with the interest of empowering and bringing people closer to the best of themselves, because this is what restoration is about. It is bringing us back to ourselves. So that's the intention of this platform. It is to make sure that at the end of it all, we are being restored, and the best person to restore us is Jesus Christ. Having said that, I would ask Doc to close for us in prayer.
Let us pray. Our dear God and Heavenly Father, we humbly come before your throne of grace and mercy, thankful for your love and for your care. and for your many mercies which are fresh each day. Sometimes we don't see it because we're faced with challenges, Father Lord, especially when we're excited about bringing a life into this world and a child comes very different from what we expected. It can be disheartening and heartbreaking, and it can be overwhelming. And then we can ask, why would a loving God allow for this to happen? And we cannot fully understand why these things happen, Father Lord, but we know, I know, that you're a good God and a loving God. And though we live in this world of sin, you are the remedy. That even though some things cannot be changed, you are able to help us and capacitate us. So I pray that in all that we shared today, it was helpful. You had designed us to be a certain way, but sin has marred your perfect creation. And so we find ourselves in this situation. So I pray for each and every parent who is experiencing these challenges. And I pray that this information was in a little bit way helpful in helping them to understand what is happening in the design, what has gone wrong. And I pray that you may give them the necessary strength, and that as we continue with these talks throughout this month, Father Lord, we may be able to help them according to the knowledge that you've given us to know how to navigate these challenges, Father Lord. And we pray for the children themselves, Father Lord. Um, Children are always a blessing, that though they may be different in every way, may we still see the joy that they can bring into our lives and love them for who they are and who you desire them to be, Father Lord. May we dedicate all the children to you. So I pray in a special way that you may be with everyone who's been here, Father Lord, and that you may bless everybody abundantly, far more than they could ever ask or imagine. All of these things we pray, not because we're worthy, but because of the gift of your Son, Christ Jesus, who is a soon coming King. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Doc. And thank you, everyone that has been part of this discussion. We hope that you have found it helpful. Please do share with your friends, families, and colleagues that may be in need of this information. May the Lord bless you and keep you till we meet again on our next coming session.